Part two. This is my $1 million webinar template. Let me just say this. What you are about to get inside of is going to make so much of your life make sense. And what I want you to do is what Ashton and I do these days. I have put Ashton on so many webinars at this point that Ashton can get off of a webinar just like me, and she can say, that wasn't a good webinar. And this was a good webinar. What I'm about to put in front of you is a guidebook. And even if they mix the order up of what I'm about to show you, if you have this guidebook, then you're going to see, as long as they hit all these major bullet points, you're going to see that they're going to make a lot of sales. Okay, if they've got their targeting right and they've got the right people on the webinar, they're going to make a lot of sales. So I want you guys for the next little bit to start paying a little more attention as to what's going on around you. If you come to one of my webinars, if you come to anybody else's webinar, take this guide that I'm about to put in front of you with you, and I want you to see, are they actually doing all of these things? Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. What I'm about to show you, it's not just a fancy name, $1 million webinar template. What I'm about to show you has generated millions of dollars in sales. And on top of that, millions of dollars in profit. So I want you to understand, I'm going to break it down into small pieces, and from those small pieces, we're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, okay? And the key here is this. The key here is this. If you use this, if you go through the offer section that I just went through, and you build an offer, and you put that offer in front of your friends, or your wife, your husband, you put that offer in front of us, and we understand that offer right away after you filled out that form, now it's time to start putting that offer in this format, okay? So let's get going. Let's talk about this. So the structure that I'm going to show you is not something you're going to find anywhere else, okay? This is something that is very much ours. This is something that comes from us learning from a lot of other people out there. I cannot say I built this on my own. This comes from lots of different places, but this is something that has been responsible for a lot of income for us. This works because of the psychology that it uses. There's a lot of psychology baked into this, and it works because of the flow. Now, let me just go ahead and say this. This does not work to sell people stuff they don't want. Let me repeat that. This does not work to sell people stuff they don't want. This works to show people how that you can take something that's a great product and how you can put this thing together in a way that something that somebody wants, it gets them off the fence, okay? So we're not going after people that don't want our product. We're going after people that are going to want our product. But we have to put things in the right format. Otherwise, it's not going to seem like the right solution to them. It's your responsibility, and I need to say this. It is your responsibility, if you believe in the products that you're offering, to sell them well. How many of you, and just give me a number 1 or a number 2 in the box on this one. Number 2, if you really believe. How many of you really believe that the things that you're selling help other people to change their lives? I won't call your name out, but how many of you really believe that what you're selling changes other people's lives for the better? Now, here's the thing. If you don't, you need to come up with a better product. Or you need to research your product better so that you do believe. I don't care what happens, belief in your product is key. And your webinars are going to be better if you do. Can you fake it? Absolutely you can, but I tell you what, it's kind of hard to look yourself in the mirror if that's what you're doing. Don't do that. This template is packed full of psychology to help you sell, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's 10 times more effective if you believe in what you're selling and you're targeting the right people. Okay, so don't share this with anybody else. I got to say that. This is one of the most effective techniques I've ever used for making sales to many people at once, and I'm going to share it with you and you alone. Okay, if you're here, it's for you. Please don't share it outside of here. So here's the key. The $1 Million Webinar template that I've been using, that we've been dialing in for years, consists of 4 separate parts. So 4 separate parts. Now those parts are pretty simple. Part number 1 is something we call the hook section. So the hook section is all about hooking them in, getting them to understand that they're in the right place at the right time. Okay? Just getting them hooked in and getting them to a point where they're going to watch. This is like the explosion at the beginning of a movie that kicks off the movie fast. Okay? That we want them to understand that they showed up at the right thing at the right time. And there's a specific way to do that. Next is what we call the bond. They've got to understand. They've got to understand that the person delivering the webinar is the right person to be delivering the webinar. That person understands their pain. That person understands what they've been through, but that person is farther down the success line than they are. And that's what we're going to establish in the bond. Now, the next part is probably one that you think you know what's going on, but there's a lot going on underneath this. This is the teaching. This is probably the most effective tool to actually sell something is this section, but you got to do it just right. And I'm going to show you today how to do it just right. I've never showed anybody this before. Even on when I a few years back, I trained on webinars. I've never showed it this before. Okay. Finally, the offer. The offer section is something that is not the easiest thing to do, but when you do it in the order I'm going to show you, it's going to work out. It's going to be done well. You don't have to get super crazy with a bunch of crazy stack stuff, things like that. If you do this right, people are going to get it. They're going to buy in. Okay? So let's talk about each of these sections, and then we're going to go in depth. But does everybody have these 4 things down? If you're taking notes at home, do you have these 4 things down? Okay. I want you to be thinking about every single webinar you watch from now on. I want you to be thinking about these 4 parts. And you can literally call when they switch from one part to the next if you know how this works. So, super simple. The hook. This is where we establish that they are in the right place. As I said, that we're about to teach them is worth their time. The bond. This is where we establish that we're someone they should trust, how we got to be where we are, and why we're different. The teaching. This is where we establish that we are knowledgeable, that we have something that can dramatically impact their lives. How we structure this section, though, is extremely important. And then finally, the offer. This is where we establish that they can drastically amplify the effects of what we just taught them. Let me repeat that sentence because it's important. This offer, it's not just about selling them something. This is where we drastically amplify the effects of what we just taught them by them choosing to work with us and to continue to work with us. So they showed up for 30 to 45 minutes. We taught them something that makes their life better in the teaching section. But now we're giving them the opportunity to amplify those results. That's what the offer does. It amplifies the teaching that we just did. We also paint them a picture of what it looks like to work with us. What are the results on the other end? Let me ask you all a question. Most of you, probably didn't get here from a webinar. You probably got here through email sales copy. But let me ask you a question. Did your desire to be a part of this program, did some of it come because we helped you see what the other side would look like for you and how your life could change because of being a part of this training? When we were making the offer to you, did some of your decision, if not most of it, come from your desire for what we helped you see is the other side of this? Once you get this training down, what you'll be able to do with it. Well, that's one of the keys. If we hadn't done that, then we wouldn't have sold any of these. You wouldn't be here. Okay? So now, what I want to do, now that we got these 4 things broken down, now I want to talk about each of these sections in depth. And this is where we start getting into the specifics of how each section works. This is where I'm going to break down exactly what you've got to do slide by slide. If you're ready, do me a favor, type the number 3 in the box so I know you're ready to go and we're ready to dive into this. I'm going to get a drink while you're doing that. Good. Okay. So let's dive into this. Each of these sections, we're going to start with the hook. Okay? So the hook. And some of this is going to start to look familiar because you've been on webinars just like I have. Okay? The hook is, like I said, it's all about getting people to understand they're in the right place and getting them settled, getting them to lock into what you're about to give them. So very simply, the first slide of these things, the first thing you're doing is you're going to give an intro. And that intro's very, very short. You basically say, hey, welcome everybody to the title of the webinar and the tagline. Now, the tagline of this, and I'm going to talk about this a little later, but the tagline is super simple. It's exactly the tagline we have for the product we're going to sell. Just in case you missed that, let me take a step back again and say that again. The tagline for the webinar, even though the title of the webinar may not be the title of the product you're going to sell them, and it usually isn't, but the tagline for the webinar is exactly the same as the tagline for your product. How to do this awesome thing in X amount of time, without having to do this thing that I hate. Does everybody understand that? So the title of your webinar, and I'm going to break down examples of this as we go. So don't worry, I've got plenty of examples to show you. But the title of your webinar is going to be something related to the overall product, but the benefit typically is exactly the same as what your product's going to provide. From there, the next thing is, who's this for? Be specific about who it's for. Be specific about the main problem it's trying to solve. Now, let me ask you all a question. Is anybody having any trouble realizing why I made you fill out the offer sheet before you started building your webinar? Does this make sense? The key is if you fill out that offer sheet, if you fill out those 6 purple elephant questions that I told you to fill out in the last section of this training, this stuff starts getting super easy. So in the who is this for section of the hook section, we talk about who are we talking to, what are the main problems they're trying to solve. Number 3, we talk about what we're covering. These are 3 to 5 points that are the big benefits. They don't have to actually be the sections of your webinar, like the stuff that you're going to talk about in the content, but they're definitely related. So these are the big things that people want to solve, right? So why are you here? Why are you here right now? These are the big 3 to 5 things that you're trying to solve. These are the big benefits that you want to get, and that's why you're here. So number 4 is my promise to you. It's called the My Promise to You section. The My Promise to You section is all about showing them, if they stick around throughout the call, what they're going to be able to do or what they're going to understand by the end of the call. Now, the reason we do this is we want them to have a good sense of exactly what they're going to walk away with if they sit through the entire call. Okay? Number 5, webinar rules. These are usually your disclaimers. This is where on a webinar I say something to the effect of this. None of this stuff is push button easy. None of this stuff is going to be for people that don't want to put in the work. This stuff that I'm going to show you is for people that work their asses off, that work themselves hard, that hustle. But if you're a hustler, this is the stuff that you're going to want to do. And listen, I can't guarantee results for anybody, because this stuff takes hard work. But if you put in the work, this is going to be the thing you want to follow. Does everybody understand the webinar rules are actually the disclaimers that you want to put in there? Okay. Now let me ask you a question. You're about to dive into a webinar. You're about to sell, an agency service. You're about to sell something. Why would you want to do a disclaimer that possibly dissuades somebody before you even start? Can you guys tell me? Can you guys tell me? Why would you want to have something that says this is not easy, this is for people that work their butts off, this is for entrepreneurs that are serious? Why would you want that? Credibility for sure. But let me ask you guys a question. How many of you want to bring on clients that are not committed, that are looking to you to save them? You don't. Trust me when I say you don't. You don't want to bring on people that don't have their own commitment to what they're doing. So this section to me is all about scaring off the people that are just hobbyists that aren't serious. I have no desire to work with a bunch of hobbyists. I have plenty of desire to work with people that are serious, because those are the people that spend the real money, but those are the people that get the real results from the things you're doing. When you guys are dead and gone, do you think you guys are going to be on your deathbed thinking about how much money you made, or do you think you're going to be thinking about the impact you made in people's lives? And I really do want an answer from you in the box right now. If you're watching a replay later, really think about this. When you're on your deathbed, are you going to be thinking about how much money you made or how much you impacted lives? Now listen, we all got to make a lot of money, but let me just tell you this. If you impact lives, you guys are going to make a fortune. That's it. You can't focus on money. You got to focus on impact. So this slide, this webinar rules, is about calling out the pack, putting it right in their face that you got to work hard for this stuff. Okay? After that, pain points. I talk about what they think their problems are. Let me ask you guys a question. How many of you realize that when you're not super educated on a topic, you think you have certain problems that are not your actual problem? Let me give you an example. When I first got into wanting to lose a little bit of weight, I thought that the majority of my problems were the fact that I wasn't going to the gym. I thought that the majority of my problems were I didn't have time to go to the gym. I thought the majority of my problems were I didn't know what to do when I got to the gym. Those are what I thought my problems were, that I wasn't working out. So let me ask you a question. Before we get into the stuff that we're going to teach them that's going to change their lives, don't you think we have to address what they think their problems are? Yeah. So in this section, what I'm doing is if I was taking my weight loss example here, I talk about maybe you think that, maybe you don't have time to get to the gym every day and it's been tough getting to the gym. Maybe you don't know what you need to be doing in the gym. These are all the things that they think their problems are because they're not actually educated on the topic. And the next section here is what I call the main idea transition. None of those things are your actual problem. This is the actual problem. So going back to the weight loss thing, I could say, as important as maybe getting to the gym is, it's not the most important thing. It's really not going to be the thing that helps you lose weight. The most important thing of all of those things that I just mentioned are none of them. The most important thing is actually what you are eating every day. That's the most important thing. Now, what I did here is I shifted off what they thought their problems were, and I shifted onto what the actual problem was. Now, let me ask you guys a question. When I get to the actual topic or the actual teaching part of the call, what do you think I'm going to focus on based on what I just did with 6 and 7 here? With that example. When I get to the actual stuff, it'll be what you eat, right? It's the actual problem. My whole teaching is going to be built around that. Now, what am I doing here? What am I technically doing here? I'm taking them out of the mode of, well, we're going to solve just these problems for you. I'm going to frame the problem correctly. Dave nailed it. Perfect, Dave. So finally, the last part is the transition. This is what we call the cliffhanger, because we're going to kind of stop into education here. We're going to move into bonds next, so we have to cliffhang. So this is where I would say, now with that in mind, if this is your actual main problem, what we talked about in number 7 here, if this is your actual main problem, then we've got to solve it. And there's 5 key things you need to do if you're going to eat the right way to lose weight, using my previous example. There's 5 pillars to doing the stuff that you need to do to actually get the result, and that's what we're going to cover. Guys, that's the hook. That's the hook. If you have those 8 pieces in the opening 10 minutes of your webinar, you're going to lock people in. If you understand what I just covered, give me a big yes in the box or number 1 so that I know you're there. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Does this look familiar? Does this stuff look familiar? How many of you have ever seen hints of this in my webinars, in other people's webinars? This is what you've got to establish. Notice, nowhere in this first section did I introduce myself. Nowhere in this first section did I talk about who I am, my family, what I'm an expert in. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Now, is it important to do that? Is it important to introduce yourself? Would you all like for me to tell you why most of you are sick of that introduction section? A lot of you just now in the chat box said you hate when people do that. You hate when they go through this big, long who they are. Would you like for me to tell you why you're so sick of it? How many of you would like to know why you hate that so much? Here's why you hate it so much. Because on the webinars that you've seen a lot of people do this, they did it in the wrong order. They did it in the wrong order. They open with that junk. And listen, I've been guilty of this in the past. I know it because I've done it, right? I know it because I've made all the mistakes. You hate it because they did it in the wrong order. If you do it in the right order, if you introduce yourself in the right place, it's not annoying. It actually makes sense as to why you would do this. Now, this is it. Once you get through this section, you now have permission because you've hooked them. You now have permission to introduce yourself. Let me ask you one more question before we get out of this, because I think it's important that we make this parallel. How many of you have ever been to see a comedian? How many of you have ever been to see a good Broadway show? How many of you have ever been to something that's showbiz? Here's the thing. They typically don't introduce themselves right away. They hook you in, then they have your permission to introduce themselves and get a little more personal, right? So you don't have permission to get personal. You don't have permission to introduce yourself past saying, "Hi, my name is Ben Atkins." You don't have permission to do that until you are through this section. I'm making a big point of that because too many people mess it up, and even you guys said it in the chat box. You hate that. But here's the thing. Once you get through the hook, now it's time to introduce yourself, but you've got to introduce yourself in a specific way. Otherwise, it's still annoying. Let's talk about that. The bond. This is a short section. This section takes 5 minutes, tops. But this is what we're doing in the bond. After we hook them in with everything I just showed you, this is what we do with the next few slides. By the way, I do have a slide deck built out for you guys with all this stuff in place so that you can just go start putting it in there. The bond. This is where you talk about who you are, your expertise. Hi, my name is Ben Atkins, and I hope you're as excited as I am about this call. I'm about to teach you those 5 pillars, those 5 secrets that I told you about at the end of the hook. Don't say the hook, but you get the idea. So before I get into those things, you need to kind of know how I learned those. So I am an expert at this. Here's a little personal background. I do all this, and I built this business, or I did this because here's my family. You know, I lost all the weight because I wanted to be around for my family. Slip in something very quickly that humanizes you. Okay, that's the first part of who you are. Now, number 2 is how you discovered what you're about to show them. So you just hinted that you're going to give them these 5 pillars to doing the thing they want to do. Here's how you discovered it. It wasn't too long ago, and over here, under number 2, it wasn't too long ago that I was here, or the star of your webinar was here. This is when things were bad. This is where they are now. It's got to relate to where they are now. So this is where you were when things weren't good. This is the light bulb moment, the thing that transitioned. This is the story of how you discovered the thing that you discovered. Now, if you're an agency owner and you're selling services, it was probably because you worked with the client. I didn't discover how to do microservices in my agency until I got burned doing these big, hefty things. Okay. And my clients weren't getting results either. So that's a big key there. So you guys see light bulb moment. And then where are you now? This is where I was. This is what changed where I was and got me to where I am now. This is what I do now. This is why. Okay. This is where they want to be. That's the story. They can see themselves in your story and they want to get past there. They want your webinar to be their light bulb moment. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever been on a webinar and you had a light bulb moment during that webinar that changed your life? I'm raising my hand way up. Way up. Webinars do that. Webinars do that. I have plenty of stories where the webinar was my light bulb moment. But that's it. In here, that's part of the process. When you're introducing yourself, your expertise, you gotta tell them, hey, things weren't always this good. This is where I was. This is what happened to change that, and this is where I am now. Now, the last part of this bond section is you've got to tell them why you're different. The easiest way to do this is what I'm about to teach you is the opposite of what most people teach about this topic. Does this make sense? Before you get out of the bond section, you're about to start teaching, so we've got to transition into teaching at the end of the bond section. Notice at the end of each of these sections, we're doing something to transition into the next section. So here, why you're different. What I'm about to teach you is the opposite. So as I go through these 5 pillars that I'm about to teach you that are going to help you lose the weight by focusing on this specific pattern of diet, you got to understand what I'm teaching you is different than most, but that's why you're going to get results that are different than most. Does everybody see kind of how you actually turn that into language? Give me a yes in the box if that makes sense, and we're going to keep moving. Awesome. Do you understand the bond section that we just went through? Does everybody understand? Okay, this is where the bond section actually goes. It's only 5 minutes, but it's going to make sense here because we've already opened up with the hook. Okay, good. Good. Let's keep going. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of the webinar. I see people screw this up all the time because they don't actually understand that the teaching is not just about teaching a method, it's about teaching a method but inside of a framework. This slide right here is worth 10 times whatever you paid to be here because it will absolutely change the way you write emails. It will absolutely change the way that you do sales presentations. It will absolutely change the way you do presentations up on stage if you're teaching a class. But of course, it will absolutely change the way that you look at really good webinars, and the webinars that you give. So let me talk about this teaching stuff. Now, have I done every webinar this way? No. But when I do them this way, we sell a lot more. Here are the 5 big points. I'm going to break down the 5 big points of teaching, and then I'm going to walk you through. Each section that you teach on has to appeal to a different sort of emotional state, a different part of the brain. Because if you get all of these 5 different parts of the brain, then you're that much closer to communicating the value. Okay? So part 1 is what we call the do the right thing. The do the right thing is the section where we're going to be really focused on the moral parts of a person. Okay? So we're going to teach something here, but it's going to appeal to morality. Okay? And I'll get back to that in a second. Number 2 is where we sort of appeal to the part of the brain that is big into stats or seeing how something stacks to form a future result. So this is what I call the big picture math. How many of you have ever seen me do this before? You've seen me break down the math of what success looks like. So how you turn this little thing that we're teaching into something that's big. The reason I do that is because I've got to appeal to the stat side of your brain, the side that does the math, the side that sees this is how this tiny little thing stacks into the future. This is your 10,000 foot overview. Now, is this like some evil ninja manipulation technique. Absolutely not. What we're doing is many times we have trouble selling our stuff because we're not explaining it well. This helps you hit all the parts of the brain that you need to actually explain something. It's not going to manipulate someone. It just shows them what they need to know to make an educated decision. Okay, so point 3, this is the secret weapon. This is the thing that I use to solve the big problem. So for instance, in this course, if I was selling this course via webinar, guess what? What is the secret weapon? Well, webinars are the secret weapon. Webinars are the secret weapon because it takes you out of one-to-one and takes you to one-to-many. Okay? So that's point 3. Point 4 is what we call the icing on the cake. Now, typically, the icing on the cake saves time and money in comparison to point 3. So it automates, simplifies, or scales point 3. How did I do that with webinars? If we were just teaching this and we were trying to sell this course, how did I do that with webinars? Well, not only am I going to teach you the secret weapon, which is how to put together a great webinar, the icing on the cake is I'm going to show you how to build an evergreen webinar. Does everybody see how I use this to get you onto this, even though I didn't sell this with a webinar? Does this make sense? Does this make sense? So the icing on the cake is I've got to teach you that next point that helps you with that. Point number 5 is what I call the lock. Think about it like this. Point 1, morality. Point 2, future pacing, 10,000 foot view. Point 3 is the big secret weapon that we use. Point 4 is the icing on the cake to make the secret weapon better. Point 5 is you're about to get off the webinar. I've got to make you understand that most people that get off the webinar, most people that learn something are not going to do anything with it. But this is what you do. This is the trick to making sure you actually do what I showed you. So typically, point 5 of the teaching is all about accountability. It's all about really getting you to make sure you actually do it. Locking it in. How many of you have ever heard me say something to the effect of, put this on your calendar before I get to the sales pitch? If you've been on any webinars that I've done, you've heard me mention that once or twice. And the reason is because I'm trying to teach you in point 5 how to make sure that you're doing it. But this is also going to transfer into the next section. So can I cover like the specifics of this and give you some examples? I want to have your permission before I do it. Give me a yes in the box. Let me ask you a question just before I do that. How many of you had a light bulb moment with this slide? How many of you, this is going to change your life and the way you sell forever with this one slide? I'm telling you, if you teach this way and you appeal to these separate parts of the brain, big things happen. Okay, so let's go through this. Point one, okay? This is your first teaching point. This is the first section of the teaching. This is all about morality and mission, okay? You've got to appeal to someone's part of the brain that it's about the moral part of what they're doing and the mission of what they're doing. So some examples are emphasize the value of hard work, emphasize the value of doing right in the world, emphasize the value of doing right by their customers and clients. How many of you are deconstructing this webinar where I'm not trying to sell you anything? How many of you are deconstructing this webinar and realized I already did this with you? How many of you are thinking back a few minutes back and realized that I did this with you earlier? Now, did I do it because I was trying to manipulate you? No, I did it because it's an important part of teaching and to make sure that we're all on the same page. I've already appealed to you that you've got to be selling something that you believe in. You got to be selling something that you believe could actually help the other person on the other end. I appealed to morality. Now, in this section, why is this so important? Because it's going to help them be more successful. The more you believe in something, the more successful you are. There's nothing evil about me teaching that. But there you go. Point two, the big picture math. This is the big overview and giving them a feeling of what life looks like when they're using everything. This is the 10,000 foot overview, the 10,000 point overview where you can look at it. So here's the thing. Lose 30 pounds by losing 2 pounds a week for the next 4 months. Okay? How to get 20 patients every week, breaking that down. Here's what we're going to be doing every single day. Here's the pieces to do that. Make 10K a month by signing up 50 clients at $200 a month. And I'm going to actually show you what each of those clients looks like and how you do it, but in an overview fashion. This is breaking down the whole rest of what you're going to be doing, but building it into math. Okay? Number three is the secret weapon. With the secret weapon, I typically open the secret weapon section up with things that don't work. Okay? So I talk about maybe you've tried this, 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 and this, and they didn't work, but here's what actually does work. The specific diet routine. The 4 things your business has to do to get more local customers. The 3 are how to sell more of your service online using webinars, to this example. This is all about this. When you're going in and doing the secret weapon, you've got to contrast it with what doesn't work. Can I tell you something that's going to blow you away? Because you probably, a lot of you don't have this experience. It's the one that's pretty unique to me. When I'm doing a report of findings with a patient, they taught you how to do a report of findings with a patient. Do you think that they told me to mention all the things, all the alternatives that they could do? Yeah. Now here's the thing. Dave says, don't you have to know the niche well to be able to do that? Yeah, Dave, you damn right you do. If you don't know your niche well enough that you can do these things, what should you be doing, Dave? What should you be doing? Ask them. Dave, I can't tell you how many times, and Dave, that's a great question, by the way. I hope you doesn't feel like I'm throwing you under the bus here. Dave, I can't tell you how many times that I've gone into an office of a professional, asked for their time, bought them lunch, and just said, hey, listen, I'm about to start a business where we're going to be helping dentists. This is the package that I'm going to offer, but I want to know more of how I can help dentists with this problem. What are the things that you're seeing? Can you help me out? I've bought lunch for countless professionals, not to sell them something, but to ask them deep questions so that I could build this sales process out deeper and to understand it deeper. Does that make sense, everybody? If you don't know all these little nooks and crannies, you got to go find them. That's the responsibility. Now you've got a framework to find them, but here you go. Point 4, the icing on the cake. So point 3, we teach how to solve the biggest problem. This is the big light bulb moment in number 3. Point 4 is how they make it even better. Let me ask you a question. Do you think people on my webinars get excited when I teach point 3? For whatever webinar it is, do you think that's when they first start getting really hyped up? They're hyped up from the stuff before, but point 3 is where I take them from 0 to 60. Point 4 is where I make the sale. Point 4 is where they go from 60 to 100. Because point 4 is the point where they're already excited, but point 4 takes them through the roof. That's the point in the presentation where I have really changed their life, and now they trust me more because I've educated them on something that blows them away. So just in the back of your mind, point 3, 0 to 60, point 4, 60 to 100. Point 4 is about saving time and saving money. How to get your food for your diet for half of what most people pay. So we just already talked about, in section 3, these are the foods that you need to eat. Now I'm going to show you how to get those foods for way cheaper than most people. See how it automates, simplifies, or scales what you already learned? How to hire someone to do those 4 things for you. So in the previous example, the 4 things your business has to do to get more customers online. Well, here's the 4 things. Here's how they work. Here's how you can hire someone to do them for you. It ups the ante. Okay, number 3, how to sell more of your services online using webinars. Well, boom, now, instead of doing the webinars live, let me show you how to automate them. It takes it from 0 to 60, and then 60 to 100. All right, finally, the lock. This is the key. Now, remember, We're about to transition into the next section, so we've got to have a transition. This is the transition point. This is when I start to talk about, and this is a small section. This is very, very tiny. It's a minute or two. I talk about, this is why most people mess up what I just taught you how to do. So I just taught you in 3 how to use webinars. In the section after that, I taught you how to automate them. Now, let me just say, most people are going to mess up 3 and 4 because of this. But I have a technique that you can use to make sure that you don't mess it up. How many of you want to know that technique, right? And that's the setup for moving into the offer section. Before I move out of teaching, the teaching section here on the webinar, how many of you understand this and it makes sense? It could be a yes if this makes sense and this helps. Good. I also built you a sheet that you can fill out. This is your webinar content section, so your teaching section. This is how you plan it in advance. You can sit down and write this stuff out. And I've built an example for you, which I'm not going to go through right now, but I've built an example for you that sort of fits into, if I were going to build a webinar for the perpetual sales engine that you're on right now and you've already bought into, if I was going to build a webinar to sell it, this would be the planning sheet that I would do for that. Does everybody understand? You already bought this product, so you understand it pretty well. Now I'm going to show you examples of how I would plan the content to sell it, but also on my offer sheet that I showed you earlier, I've done that one for you too. Let's keep moving. Finally, part 4 of a really great webinar is the offer section. Okay? Now remember, at the end of the teaching section, we talked about part 5 was the lock. And we talked about, now this, I just showed you all this stuff, but these are some reasons that you might not be able to do it. So we go right into that in the offer section. So here's what you need to use, what you learned so far. All the things that I just taught you, how you can actually do it, here are the things that you need to do it. Of everybody that I've ever helped with this stuff, these are the things that they do. Pick 2 of these 5. This is where we get into locking them into what they need to be successful. Now, let me ask you a question. Everything that you all know about success and actually growing, it lies within one of those 5 things. Now, there's plenty of little offshoots there, but like those 5 things, everybody that I know that has grown 5 to 10 times what they were in a year is using one of those things. Think about it. How many of you feel like you would be better in your business if you worked on your mindset? Just your mindset of how you looked at the world. If you worked on your mindset more, how many of you feel like you'd be better? And I'm really asking you. How many feel like you'd be better? Okay, let me ask you this. How many of you feel like you'd be better if you had a more clear plan of what you needed to do next? You had a more clear plan of what you needed to do next and what you needed to do every day to grow your business. Okay. How many of you feel like you'd be better if you had more accountability built into your life? How many of you would feel better if you had a mentor? Someone that could guide you and pick you up when you fall down on the path. Yeah. How many of you would feel better if you had more automation built into your business, built into your life? So here's what I want you guys to understand. As you transition out of the teaching and you start talking about the things that can actually help them with doing what they've already learned to actually get it done, this is the section where I start talking about these are the things that I use to be successful, to make sure that I actually did. I got a mentor. I worked on my mindset. Pick 2 of the 5 at least and weave those into this next section. Now I'm going to give you an example here. So we just talked about, how you can do webinars, how you can automate webinars, but I'm going to tell you just from experience, there's a ton of people that are going to get off this webinar and they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. And this is why. This is why. They don't have a clear plan of how to implement it. And just to be honest, they don't know what to do when they run into a brick wall. So you're going to get out there, you're going to start doing this, you're going to run into a brick wall, and you're not going to know what to do, and so you're going to give up because you're going to get frustrated. I've seen it a million times. What I gave you today was great, and it walks you through it, but there's still some things I wasn't able to show you. And what do you do? What do you do if you get stuck? This is what holds most people back. They don't have a clear plan, and they don't have someone to help them when they run into a brick wall. Now, let me tell you, if you want to be successful with what I just showed you today, you better have a clear plan of what you're going to do next. You better have a clear plan how to automate those webinars, how to put those webinars together in the first place. And you know what? You better have someone that has done it before, that has walked the path and knows exactly what they're doing. Okay, does everybody see how I just transitioned out of the story, the content from the lock into the offer? If we were selling the webinar system, does everybody see what I just did? Does everybody see how I'm doing my best to help them not fall in a trap of not doing what I just showed them how to do, but I'm really focusing on the things that they need to do to get there. Now, of course, these two things fit into what I'm about to sell them. Let me ask you a big question. Those of you that were reading the emails, not even a webinar, but those of you that were reading the emails that I sent to you, how many of you felt like you could go do a lot of stuff just from reading the emails and what I taught you in the emails? The emails to get to this product and inside of this product were very educational. But there were some subtle things built in that said, if you want to do it the right way, if you want to know how to do these things and you have a plan to do them, and then have some automation and have a mentor that has done it before. You see how I built these things into the actual email copy and baked them into that? That's what this is all about. Does everybody understand the transition from the teaching section to the offer section? And number one, we start talking about these are the things that you have to be successful. Okay, good. Because this is a difficult transition for most. Most people have trouble with the transition from teaching to offer. That's how you do it. You start subtly talking about the things that they need to do to lock in what they just learned, and it's going to be 2 of those 5 things. It'll take some practice, but you'll get it. Okay? Don't mention the product here. We're not in product mode yet. We're just stressing the values and the tools they need. But here's where we talk about the fork in the road. This is big. So I just talked about, hey, you need this to make sure you get everything out of what you just learned. But here's the fork in the road. Leaving this webinar, you can stay exactly the same. You can do nothing, and it will just be an hour that you spent with me. Nothing is going to change. You can keep on doing all the things that don't work. You can keep going to the gym. You can keep doing the different workouts. You can go find a bunch of workouts, but that's not going to get you the results that you want. And let me just say that you're still going to be tired. You're still going to have the extra weight. So here you talk about what doesn't work, all the things they tried that don't work, and you talk about how they felt, the pain points because of doing those things that they didn't work. That's if they stay the same. So I have a slide in there that says, this is what happens if you decide to do nothing, or you decide to keep doing all the things that you've been doing. And then the next slide is, under this fork in the road, or you can invest in doing something different, something that's proven to work, and you can start getting clients from webinars. You can start adding in new income and charging high ticket prices. Hit the big benefits, right? So this is the fork in the road. Notice the fork. Notice we talk about what doesn't work. Notice how we talk about how they feel because it doesn't work. And notice we start talking about that they can invest in change. They can change and do something different. And here's the big thing. How many of you have ever been on a webinar where someone said, you could do this and it would cost you this much money. You could do this and it would cost you this much money. And they're stacking the value to basically warp the pricing reality in your head. Yeah. This is how you do a correct value stack. If you decide that you're going to stay the same, this is what you can expect. Hours and hours of doing the same stuff with no change, no different results. It's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars in missed income or healthcare cost, if we're talking about the diet, to do this. And you're going to feel like crap. So when I do about what happens if they stay the same after I do the fork in the road, we talk about the fork in the road, we talk about investing in change, we talk about what happens if they stay the same, the time, financial, and health cost. And then I say this, but if you do want to change, if you do want to go through a system that works, this is how I can help. I created a program called This. This is how it's helped others. If you've got testimonials, cool, you can throw one in there, but you don't have to have that. This is what I've created. This is what it's designed to do. And then you start going through the product stack. You say in section 1 of this product, I'm going to show you how to do this. And it's going to address pain point. Section 2, I'm going to show you how to do this. Pain point. Break it into sections. Each section should address a pain point. Each section should provide a benefit that gets them closer to the end goal. Each section of your product, if you go back to the product that we talked about earlier that we built before, that's where this goes. Who is this product for? This product is for chiropractors who are tired of working long hours and not making the money that they want to, and they want to stop struggling with bringing new patients through the door. You guys get the idea. Be very specific. This goes back to your purple elephant, who you're after. Why are you making this offer? I'm making this offer because I'm tired of seeing people struggle, tired of seeing agency owners struggle trying to get clients using one-on-one techniques. I want to show you how to get tons of clients with one-to-minute. You guys get the idea, right? So tell them why you're making the offer. Quick. Call them to action. Give them the link. Tell them how many spots you've got open for your thing. Tell them what to do. If the idea here is get them to schedule a strategy call, link them to the place where they can schedule a strategy call. If it's sending them to a buy button, send them to a buy button. My rule is this. If it's under $3,000, I can send them to a buy button. If it's $3,000 plus, I typically get them on a strategy call. If I'm selling services, even if they're microservices, I try to get them on the phone because I can usually sell them a bigger package if I get them on the phone. Now, optional here is recap the offer, bonuses if you do bonuses. Now, if you do bonuses, tie them into the scarcity, meaning only the first 25 get this or only the first person to call me gets this. Call to action, thank you, and sign off. Does this look familiar? Does this look familiar to anybody? Yep. So I filled out an offer planner because the offer planner goes really well with that last section. And I filled out what the offer was and what my expectations were for you for this particular product. So you can sort of see, I use the offer planner and I use the webinar content planner. I fill those out before I build the webinar. And that's what you should do too. Now, I built you this. I'm going to show you this real quick. We're not going to spend a ton of time in it because you can go through it later. I think it all makes sense. But I built you this. And I want to show you this real quick. This is the slide deck that corresponds directly to what I just showed you. So not only are you getting this slide deck, but I'm also going to give you this, which is the full walkthrough of what we just did in a PDF format. So you guys are getting this mind map of all the things we did, and this directly relates to this, which is your slide deck. Now here's how this slide deck works. In this slide deck, you can delete this first slide. This first slide is just to identify that this is the section that you're in. I'll have you guys a PowerPoint version of this too. But each of these slides corresponds to one of the points that was in the mind map. All you have to do is fill out the slide and answer the questions and build your webinar. I would venture to say, go in and throw some pictures in that correspond to what we're talking about here to make it a little less boring. But each of these sections has what you need to do in it. So literally it's a paint by numbers slide deck. And now that you understand the psychology behind what we're doing, you can go fill this stuff out. Does that make sense? My problem is, though, if I just gave you this and didn't explain what needs to be accomplished in each of those sections, it wouldn't work as well. Okay, because obviously point 5, the lock, this could have 4 slides underneath this teaching point. Especially the secret weapon section, it could have this. And listen, here's the thing. You can make these slides as pretty as you want. You can leave them white. The core thing is that you're actually teaching something good. The core thing is that you're actually selling something good. So this is coming with you. That will be in the download section. That'll help you guys get a jump start on what you've got. Ashton and I will make sure that we've got you guys not only a PDF format of the mind map, but we've got you a Keynote for Mac as well as a PowerPoint setup for those of you that are using Windows computers. So you guys will get that. Okay? So, any questions? Any questions? Dave says, do you have an actual webinar template? What do you mean, Dave? That's the template I use. Like when I build something from scratch, I use that template that I just showed you that I'm going to give you. Okay? Oh, yeah, I'm going to give you guys several webinars to go from. And I'm going to walk you through those. Something I've got to warn you about, some of the products I'm going to give you don't follow that structure exactly. Why do you think that is? I need to bring this point up right now. Why do you think I leave some of the things out and mix them up in some of my product webinars? This is important that you understand this because this is life-changing once you get this. I don't know why it took me so long to understand why people do this, but yeah. Why have I left some things out in some of my webinars? Here's why. What I just showed you is the format that I use when I'm doing webinars to an absolutely cold audience that doesn't know who I am, has never met me before, is not on my email list to start with. That's a cold audience. That is the structure I use to warm people up, to get them interested from start to finish. When I'm doing webinars to just my list, people that have been on webinars with me before, I know the things that they already know in the back of their mind, so I cut some of the things out and I rearrange a little bit. All the elements are still there, but you get what I'm saying? When I'm doing a warm audience, I can leave certain things out because they already know me. They already know my story. So I'm going to give you guys some of this stuff. By the way, if you're in the advanced section of this course, of course, I've got some pre-built webinars that follow this exact structure that you can build from. Okay. So let's keep moving. Let's keep moving. Oh, that's a great question. Let me actually go back and address this. That's a wonderful, wonderful question. So Ricky says there's no Q&A at the end of the webinar because this is a recorded webinar, right? Yeah. Like, here's the thing. If you're doing a live webinar and you want to do Q&A at the end, absolutely do it. Absolutely do it. I mean, I think that's a great thing. But the idea here is, Ricky, is that most of the questions that someone would have, you've baked that into your content already. And the idea is in and out. And Ricky, a lot of these webinars that I do are designed to get people on the phone because I'm doing them for, like to sign people up to coaching, consulting, and agency stuff. So a lot of what I'm doing here is I want them to ask their questions when they get on the phone with me. Does that make sense? So leaving a little bit open in that is big. If you've got like a digital product with a buy button, you may build a section at the end of your webinar that is just the most common things that you think someone might ask. Does that make sense? But yeah, a lot of this comes down to the fact that I automate these things. So